I spent years believing that no one could truly love me, because whenever they looked at me, they only saw my body, never the person I was. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I live in a small town in Ohio, where everybody knows everybody else's business. I'm sitting here in my apartment, looking out at the same street where I walked to school as a child, where I experienced my first taste of rejection, where I learned that being different, being bigger, meant being less worthy of love, friendship, and basic human dignity. I've carried this weight for so long, not just on my body, but in my heart. And today I want to share my story with you, because I know there are others out there who understand exactly what I'm talking about. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible or unworthy because of your appearance, please consider subscribing to this channel. The Shadows of Obesity exists to give voice to experiences like mine, to create a space where we can share our truths without judgment. Your subscription helps ensure these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. I wasn't always heavy. There are pictures of me as a toddler, chubby-cheeked and smiling, the kind of baby fat that everyone finds adorable. My mom would dress me in frilly dresses and bow headbands, parading me around like I was her little doll. "Look at those cheeks," relatives would coo, pinching them until they hurt. But somewhere around age 6, that baby fat never melted away like it was supposed to. Instead, it seemed to multiply, settling into my arms, my belly, my face, until I became the chunky kid in every family photo. My earliest memory of truly understanding I was different happened in 2nd grade. We were doing a unit on health and nutrition, and Mrs. Patterson had us all stand up to measure our heights and weights. I remember the excitement of the other kids, comparing numbers like they were trading baseball cards. When it was my turn to step on the scale, I heard her intake of breath, that sharp little gasp that adults make when they're trying not to react to something shocking. She wrote down my number quickly, quietly. But Tommy Hernandez, who was standing right behind me, saw it anyway. "Holy cow! Sarah weighs more than my dad," he announced to the entire class. The laughter that followed wasn't mean-spirited, at least not at first. It was the kind of surprised laughter that comes from disbelief, but it burned through me like acid. I felt my cheeks turn red, not the cute chubby cheeks that relatives love to pinch, but the hot, shameful red of humiliation. Mrs. Patterson tried to quiet the class, but the damage was done. For the first time in my 7 years of life, I understood that my body was wrong, that it was something to be ashamed of, something that made other people uncomfortable. That night, I asked my mom why I was so big. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans swimming in butter, her hands stilled on the mixing bowl, and I could see her struggling with how to answer. Finally, she said, "Some people are just built differently, honey. You're perfect just the way you are." But even as she said it, I noticed how she avoided my eyes, how she turned back to her cooking a little too quickly. The words felt hollow, like something she was supposed to say rather than something she truly believed. My parents weren't cruel people. They loved me in their way. But they were also products of their own up-binging, their own insecurities. My dad had been heavy as a child too, and I think seeing me struggle with the same issues brought up painful memories for him. Instead of addressing the problem head-on, they did what seemed kindest at the time. They pretended it wasn't really a problem at all. When I came home crying because kids had called me names, they'd take me for ice cream to cheer me up. When I felt left out of playground activities, they'd buy me new toys to play with by myself. Food became comfort, isolation became normal, and the cycle continued. The bullying started gradually. In elementary school, it was mostly just comments. Fatty, tubby, whale. Kids would moo at me in the hallways or make jokes about me breaking chairs. I learned to laugh along, to pretend it didn't hurt, because the alternative was to cry, and crying only made it worse. I became the funny fat kid, the one who would make self-deprecating jokes before anyone else could. If I said it first, if I laughed at myself first, maybe it would hurt less when they did it. But it didn't hurt less. Every joke, every sideways glance, every time I was picked last for teams in gym class, it all accumulated like stones in my chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to believe that I deserved the same kindness and respect as everyone else. By 4th grade, I had learned to eat my lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria, where I could hide behind books and pretend I was choosing solitude instead of having it forced upon me. The physical challenges came early too. I couldn't run as fast as the other kids, couldn't climb the monkey bars, couldn't fit comfortably in the tiny plastic chairs we sat in during story time. My knees hurt after walking upstairs. I got out of breath easily. Simple childhood activities became sources of embarrassment and pain. During presidential fitness tests, I would fake being sick rather than face the humiliation of not being able to complete a single pull-up or timing out on the mile run. My teachers, well-meaning as they were, often made things worse without realizing it. They'd suggest I might be more comfortable, sitting in a different chair, or they'd automatically excuse me from certain physical activities, assuming I couldn't participate. Their kindness felt like pity, and pity felt worse than outright cruelty because at least cruelty was honest about what it was. At home, mealtimes became battlefields of unspoken tension. My mom would put salad on my plate alongside the regular dinner, or she'd suggest I might want to go easy on the bread tonight. My dad would make comments about portion sizes, always couched in concern for my health, but I could hear the disappointment underneath. They were ashamed of me too, I realized. They loved me, but they were also embarrassed by me, by the way other parents looked at our family, by the questions about what they were feeding me, or why they weren't doing something about my weight. The worst part was the way adults would speak about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Standing behind me in line at the grocery store, they'd whisper about childhood obesity and parental responsibility. At school functions, I'd catch fragments of conversations. Such a sweet girl, but followed by concerned murmurs and sideways glances in my direction. I learned that I was not just a child struggling with weight. I was a problem to be discussed, a cautionary tale, a source of judgment for my entire family. By the time I finished elementary school, I had learned to make myself as invisible as possible. I wore oversized clothes to hide my shape, kept my head down in hallways, and spoke only when spoken to. I had friends, sort of, but they were friendships built on convenience rather than genuine connection. I was the girl who would do your homework for you, who would let you copy her tests, who would laugh at your jokes even when they were about me. I was useful, tolerable, but never truly wanted or valued for who I was as a person. Food had become my primary relationship. Late at night, when my parents were asleep, I would sneak downstairs and eat whatever I could find. Cookies, leftover dinner, spoonfuls of peanut butter straight from the jar. The shame of these midnight binges was overwhelming, but in those moments, chewing and swallowing, I felt a temporary peace. Food didn't judge me, didn't reject me, didn't make me feel like I was taking up too much space in the world. It was the only thing that consistently made me feel better, even as I knew it was making everything else worse. The irony wasn't lost on me, even as a child. The thing that comforted me was also the thing that made me need comfort in the first place. But at 8, 9, 10 years old, I didn't have the tools to break that cycle. I didn't understand that I was trying to fill an emotional void with food, that I was eating my feelings instead of processing them. All I knew was that life felt less painful when I was eating, and that was reason enough to keep doing it. If elementary school had been difficult, middle school was a special kind of hell, designed specifically for someone like me. Suddenly, bodies mattered more than they ever had before. Girls were developing curves, boys were noticing those curves, and I was just getting bigger and more awkward by the day. The casual cruelty of childhood gave way to the calculated meanness of adolescence, where being different wasn't just noticed, it was weaponized. The first day of 6th grade, I remember standing in front of my closet, trying to find something that would make me invisible. My mom had taken me shopping for big girl clothes at the beginning of the summer, which really meant plus-size clothes from the women's section, because nothing in the juniors department would fit me. While other girls my age were picking out cute tops and trendy jeans, I was relegated to shapeless blouses and elastic waist pants that made me look like someone's middle-aged aunt. I was 12 years old and already dressing like I was 40. Walking into Jefferson Middle School that first day, I felt the weight of every stare, every whisper, every quick glance, followed by turned heads and hushed conversations. The hallways seemed narrower than they had in elementary school, and I was taking up more space than ever. I knocked into someone's locker with my backpack and heard a voice behind me mutter, "Watch it, earthquake." The laughter that followed me down the hall told me that middle school was going to be 3 years of fresh torment. Lunch became an exercise in strategic planning. The cafeteria was a minefield of social hierarchies, and I quickly learned that there was no safe place for someone like me. If I sat alone, I became an easy target for comments and flying food. If I tried to join a table, I'd be met with awkward silence or outright rejection. "Sorry, we're saving this seat," became the soundtrack of my adolescence, even when the seat remained empty for the entire lunch period. I developed a routine of eating quickly, and then spending the rest of lunch period in the bathroom, sitting in a stall with my feet pulled up so no one would know I was there. Sometimes I'd hear groups of girls come in, gossiping about who was dating whom, who wore what, who was invited to whose birthday party. I was never part of these conversations, never mentioned except as the butt of a joke or an example of what not to become. The PE locker room was its own special torture chamber. While other girls chatted and changed clothes with the casual confidence of people comfortable in their own skin, I would hide in the corner stall, changing as quickly as possible to avoid anyone seeing my body. The regulation gym clothes, those tiny shorts and fitted t-shirts, looked like jokes on my frame. I learned to always volunteer to be the scorekeeper or equipment manager for games, anything to avoid actually participating and having my physical limitations put on display for everyone to see. Dating, romance, crushes, these were concepts that seemed to exist in a parallel universe that I could observe, but never enter. While my classmates passed notes and held hands in the hallways, I watched from the sidelines like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. I had crushes, of course. There was Marcus in my English class who had kind eyes and always said hello to me, and David who was in my art class and once complimented a drawing I'd done. But I never entertained the possibility that these feelings could be reciprocated. Fat girls didn't get boyfriends. Fat girls didn't go to dances. Fat girls didn't get asked to be anyone's Valentine. The one time someone did ask me out, it turned out to be a cruel joke orchestrated by a group of popular kids. His name was Brandon, and he was cute in that generic way that 12-year-old girls find irresistible. He approached me after math class with a shy smile and asked if I wanted to go to the movies with him that weekend. For about 10 minutes, I existed in a fantasy world where someone actually found me attractive, where I was worthy of romantic interest, where my body didn't define my worth as a person. The truth came out when I overheard them laughing about it in the hallway. "I can't believe she actually thought you were serious," one of his friends said. "Did you see her face when you asked? She looked like she was going to cry from happiness." Their laughter echoed off the lockers, and I felt something die inside my chest. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the realization that my loneliness and desperation was so obvious that they had become entertainment for others. My academic performance, which had always been my saving grace, began to suffer. It's hard to concentrate on algebra when you're constantly worried about where you're going to sit at lunch, or whether the desk chair is going to hold your weight, or if someone's going to say something cruel that will stick with you for the rest of the day. My grades slipped from A's to B's to C's, and my parents' disappointment added another layer to my already overwhelming sense of failure. The health problems started manifesting in ways that couldn't be ignored anymore. I was constantly out of breath, even from walking up a single flight of stairs. My knees ached all the time. I developed stretch marks on my arms and thighs that looked like angry red lightning bolts across my skin. Sleep became difficult because my own weight made it hard to find a comfortable position, and I'd wake up feeling exhausted no matter how many hours I had slept. Doctor's appointments became exercises in humiliation. Stepping on the scale in front of the nurse, hearing the number called out loud, seeing it written down in my chart with what felt like an exclamation point of judgment. Doctors would speak to my parents about me as if I wasn't in the room, using clinical terms that somehow made everything sound even worse. Morbid obesity, insulin resistance, early onset type 2 diabetes risk. I was 13 years old and already being described in terms of disease and dysfunction. My parents' approach to my weight became more desperate and misguided as my size increased. They tried bribing me, new clothes if I lost 10 pounds, a new bike if I lost 20. They tried shaming me, pointed comments about how much I was eating, disappointed sighs when I reached for seconds, comparisons to other kids my age who were more active. They tried controlling my food intake, which only drove me to become more secretive about my eating habits. I became an expert at hiding food, at eating in private, at making it look like I was following their rules while actually doing whatever I needed to do to cope with the emotional pain that felt like it was eating me alive from the inside. I'd take money from my mom's purse to buy snacks from vending machines at school. I'd eat my lunch and then buy another lunch with the excuse that I'd forgotten mine. I'd volunteer to help with bake sales, just so I could eat the leftover cookies and brownies. The worst part was how my weight affected my relationship with my family. My little brother, who was naturally thin and athletic, became the golden child by default. Every family photo was an exercise in strategic positioning, trying to hide as much of my body as possible behind other people. Family gatherings became performances where I had to pretend to eat less than I wanted, while everyone watched my plate like hawks, ready to make comments about my choices. My extended family had no filter when it came to discussing my weight. Aunts and uncles would grab my arms or pinch my stomach, making jokes about baby fat that we all knew wasn't baby fat anymore. "You have such a pretty face," became the backhanded compliment I heard most often, the implication being that everything else about me was disappointing. Grandparents would slip me diet books for Christmas or birthday gifts, wrapped up like presents but feeling like indictments. By 8th grade, I had effectively removed myself from social situations entirely. I stopped trying to make friends because the rejection hurt too much. I stopped participating in class activities because I was tired of being the odd one out. I stopped caring about my appearance because what was the point of trying to look good when nothing could make me look acceptable anyway? I existed in a bubble of isolation that felt safer than constantly putting myself out there, only to be reminded that I didn't belong. The eating got worse, more compulsive, more shameful. I would plan my binges like military operations, waiting for times when my parents would be out so I could eat, without judgment or interruption. I'd consume entire packages of cookies, whole pizzas, containers of ice cream, anything that would provide that temporary numbing of emotional pain. And then I'd hate myself for it. Promise I'd do better tomorrow. Swear that this was the last time. Promises I'd break again and again. High school loomed ahead like another mountain to climb, and I had no energy left for climbing. At 14, I weighed more than most adult women. My body ached constantly, and my spirit was broken in ways that felt irreparable. I looked in the mirror and saw a monster, a failure, a person so fundamentally flawed that love seemed impossible. The girl who had once dreamed of being a teacher or a writer or anything meaningful had been replaced by someone whose only goal was to get through each day without falling apart completely. If I thought middle school was hell, high school was a descent into something even darker. By the time I started my freshman year, I weighed 280 pounds. Let me put that in perspective for you. I was 15 years old and weighed more than most NFL linebackers. Finding clothes that fit required trips to specialty stores in the next town over, where I'd shop in sections labeled Women's Plus while trying to pretend I belonged there, that this was normal for someone my age. The physical reality of existing in my body had become a daily nightmare. Simple tasks that everyone else took for granted. Walking upstairs, getting out of bed, bending over to tie my shoes, required planning and effort that exhausted me before my day even began. I couldn't fit in the standard desks at school anymore, so I had to use the few oversized chairs scattered around the building, which meant arriving early to classes to secure one, and staying late to avoid the rush of students who might see me struggling to squeeze in and out. Airplane seats, movie theater chairs, restaurant booths. The world was designed for people half my size, and every public outing became an exercise in humiliation and discomfort. I stopped going places unless absolutely necessary, because the logistics of fitting into spaces built for normal-sized people was too overwhelming, too embarrassing, too painful, both physically and emotionally. The bullying in high school took on a more sophisticated cruelty. Instead of just calling me names, students would take photos of me and post them online with cruel captions. They'd make fake dating profiles using my pictures as a joke. They'd start rumors about how much I could eat, or make up stories about chairs breaking under my weight. The internet had given them new ways to torture me, and the humiliation could follow me home, into my bedroom, into what should have been my safe spaces. I remember the exact moment I realized I had become completely invisible as a human being. It was during lunch in my junior year, and I was sitting alone as usual, trying to eat quickly so I could escape to the library. A group of popular kids sat down at the table next to mine, close enough that I could hear every word of their conversation. But they talked about me like I wasn't even there, like I was a piece of furniture they could discuss freely. "Oh my God, can you imagine being that big?" one girl said, glancing in my direction. "Like, how do you even live with yourself?" I would literally rather die than look like that. Her friends agreed, building on each other's comments about how disgusting it must be to be me, how they couldn't understand how someone could let themselves go that badly, how sorry they felt for my parents. They talked about my body, my eating habits, my appearance with the casual cruelty of people discussing a particularly disturbing movie they'd seen. I sat there, 3 feet away, eating my sandwich and pretending I couldn't hear them, pretending their words weren't carving deeper wounds into a heart that was already barely beating. That night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in months. I had been avoiding mirrors, avoiding photos, avoiding any reflection that would force me to confront what I had become. But that night, I looked. I saw the way my face had disappeared into folds of fat, how my neck had vanished entirely, how my arms hung like shapeless sacks from my shoulders. I saw stretch marks covering every inch of visible skin, angry red lines that looked like someone had taken a knife to my body. I saw a person I didn't recognize, someone who looked nothing like the little girl who used to dream about her future, who used to believe in possibilities. The health problems that had been manageable in middle school became life-threatening in high school. I developed sleep apnea and had to use a CPAP machine just to breathe at night. My blood pressure was dangerously high for someone my age. I was pre-diabetic, had fatty liver disease, and my knees were deteriorating under the constant strain of carrying so much weight. Doctors stopped being gentle about my condition and started using words like life-threatening and urgent intervention required. But the scariest part wasn't the physical deterioration. It was the complete emotional shutdown that happened inside me. I stopped feeling things the way other people did. Joy, excitement, hope, even sadness. Everything became muted, distant, like I was watching my life happen to someone else from behind thick glass. The only emotions I could access were shame and hunger, and they fed off each other in an endless cycle that I couldn't break. Food had evolved from comfort to compulsion to pure addiction. I wasn't eating because I was hungry or because food tasted good. I was eating because it was the only thing that could quiet the screaming in my head for a few minutes. I would eat until I was physically sick, and then hate myself for it, and then eat more because the self-hatred was unbearable. I was trapped in a cycle that felt impossible to escape, where the thing that was killing me was also the only thing keeping me alive. My parents had moved from concern to desperation to a kind of defeated acceptance that broke my heart. I could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the way they'd given up trying to help me because nothing they did made any difference. They'd tried everything: doctors, nutritionists, weight loss programs, therapy, even considering gastric surgery for someone my age. But I sabotaged every effort, not because I wanted to stay fat, but because I had lost all belief that change was possible. The isolation became complete during my senior year. I had no friends, no social life, no activities outside of the bare minimum required to graduate. I skipped prom, graduation parties, all the milestone events that should have marked this transition into adulthood. Instead, I spent most of my free time in my bedroom, eating and watching TV shows about other people living the life I felt I would never have. Dating, romance, intimacy. These remained as foreign to me as space travel. I was 18 years old and had never been kissed, never held someone's hand romantically, never experienced the butterflies of mutual attraction. I watched other girls my age fall in love, get heartbroken, learn about relationships through trial and error, while I remained completely outside of that entire aspect of human experience. I convinced myself that I didn't want those things anyway, that I was better off alone. But the loneliness was eating me alive from the inside. At my heaviest, I weighed 320 pounds. I was 19 years old and trapped in a body that felt like a prison I could never escape. Getting dressed required help from my mother. Climbing a single flight of stairs left me gasping for breath. I couldn't fit in most cars, couldn't use public transportation, couldn't participate in any activity that required physical movement. I had become a prisoner in my own home, in my own body, in my own life. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in March. I was alone in the house and I had eaten an entire large pizza, a pint of ice cream, and a bag of cookies in the span of 2 hours. I was lying on my bedroom floor because my bed could no longer support my weight comfortably. And I couldn't get up, not because I was too full, not because I was tired, but because my body had literally become too heavy for me to lift. I lay there for 3 hours, crying and trying to find the leverage to get myself upright before my parents came home and helped me to my feet. That night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the whir of my CPAP machine, I realized that I was going to die. Not someday, not in the distant future, but soon. My body was shutting down. My spirit was already gone, and I was going to die having never really lived. I was going to die having never been loved, never been seen as beautiful, never been valued for who I was, instead of what I looked like. I was going to die as a cautionary tale, a tragedy, a waste of a life that had so much potential that got buried under layers of fat and shame and self-hatred. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you've ever felt trapped in your own body or believed that you're unworthy of love because of how you look, please know that you're not alone. I know how isolating this struggle can be, how it feels like no one could possibly understand the depth of shame and despair that comes with living in a body that feels like your enemy. Please, leave a comment below and share your experience. Tell me where you are in your journey, what your darkest moments have looked like, what keeps you going when everything feels hopeless. Your story matters, your pain is valid, and sometimes just knowing that someone else understands can be the first step toward finding your way back to the light. I read every single comment, and I want you to know that I see you, I hear you, and you are not as alone as you feel. The darkness I was living in felt permanent, absolute, like a tunnel with no end in sight. But as I lay there that night, unable to move under my own power, something tiny shifted inside me. It wasn't hope exactly, and it certainly wasn't confidence that I could change. It was more like a whisper, a tiny voice that said maybe, just maybe, this didn't have to be how my story ended.